This is a GeForce 1660 Ti. This bad boy has 6 whole gigabytes of VRAM. But y'all really think 6 gigs means this card is a decrepit piece of No! Nvidia used to be good, guys, remember? All jokes aside, this card is actually really good for what it is, and I was able to pick it up for 120, so I can't complain much. This being said, can this card handle 2025 standards? I feel like standards for 2025 is to run 1080p at least 120 FPS. Anyways, I put the GPU in, screwed it in place, put my panel on, and then somehow forgot to plug in the PCIe pin. And I am using a 1030 as a capture card just so I don't lose performance while recording. I think we can all agree that GTA 5 is just a great game for benchmark videos. With that in mind, our first test is on GTA 5 at 1080p, very high, or max graphics. And so far in the garage, we're looking at a consistent 75-ish FPS, but outside, it will be a lot different. Yeah, we're down to 50 FPS now, but 1080p at 50 FPS on very high is not bad at all. But once we start driving around some more and get into the city, it will most likely drop a bit. Like now we are at about 40 FPS, which is playable, but not playable if that makes sense. Now on high settings, we are getting very close to 100 FPS in the garage, which is 30 more than on very high. And outside of the garage, we're sitting at 70 FPS. This is amazing. We got 1080p, 70 FPS at high graphics, more than playable on a 60Hz monitor, and it leaves you with some room for frame drops. Again, once we get into the city and start driving around, it will go down a bit. It shouldn't be below 50 like how it was on very high, but as you can see, it has very occasional drops that go down to 60 and a little below. Even in the city, we are maintaining a fair 60 FPS. This is literally perfect for a 60Hz monitor, even with traffic and me crashing, and literally everything going on, we are chilling. And on medium, or the lowest settings in the game, we're getting a little over 100 FPS in the garage, which isn't looking good. Outside of the garage, we're at 80 FPS. I was expecting a lot more, and this technically did not beat the test. So this card would be good if you play at 60 Hz. It is not reaching anything above unless you drop the resolution and can optimize it better than me. I think I might have forgotten to change some settings, or I might have done something wrong, to be honest, because it should be able to run GTA 5 better than this. Our ego is hurt after that GTA 5 benchmark, so we're now on CS2 on max graphics, 90 FPS, which is good. But I want my 144 FPS. I mean, I'm getting absolutely slapped here, man. It's the frame rate. Anyways, high settings are running 155 FPS. I have a 144 Hz monitor, so this is amazing for me. I personally would rather play at low settings, but whatever, this is great. I don't think it is dropping lower than 140 FPS. This works for me. It already passed the test. Yeah, so no surprise, we are over 200 FPS on medium graphics. Quite optimal if you ask me. I mean, there's no way in hell this is dropping below 144 FPS, right? Do we even have to test low settings? Yes, we do, because I am curious. Not too much of a difference, but look at how high that number is. Looks great up there, doesn't it? Apex Legends is running about 80 FPS on ultra graphics and the drop ship or whatever it's called. I don't know. As you can see, we're hitting triple digits on the ground. But it's not 144 FPS, man. We need the big 144. I mean, I would have made it to the big leagues if I had 144. So on high graphics, we're at 140 FPS, but it isn't stable enough, so it doesn't really count. I mean, right when we leave the building, it just drops to 120 FPS. But it is more than playable. Can't complain at all, you know. I can definitely play matches at this frame rate. I just need the 144 though. Oh man, do I have something to tell you. More than 144 FPS on medium. This is perfect for me. But we're getting frame drops, especially in combat here, which isn't great at all if you want to play competitively. Or just want an advantage on other players. Good news is, we're getting 200 FPS on the lowest settings, with not so many frame drops, even in combat. We don't really go under 190. I would personally keep my graphics like this with maybe increased render distance. This would let me cap my FPS at 144 without frame drops, and I mean, I'm not negatively affected by it, right? So yeah, Apex technically passes the test. You can obviously game on every single game in the benchmark actually, but you can game competitively on Apex, I guess. Here on PUBG, we're getting 80 FPS on the plane, and while we are skydiving, we get down to 50 FPS. Not the best, but it is definitely playable. We want 144 though, so this doesn't pass so far. On the ground, we're getting 60 FPS. Perfect for 60 Hz players. I mean, 1080p Ultra is not anything to complain about at this frame rate. The game looks great and plays great, you know? You can see the weapons look beautiful as well. I mean, the textures are more than great. Got some nice post-processing and some motion blur going on here. Even when we are running around this field here, we're still getting 60 FPS. I'm sure it would drop in combat though, but it shouldn't really go below 40. At least I hope so. Now on high settings, we're getting about 75 FPS. A lot better, and the frame drops will be less noticeable. This is not anything I would complain about, you know. This is more than playable, but it is not 144 FPS. Even in combat, we're getting more FPS, but with occasional drops to 70. This is playable. On medium graphics, we're getting about 15 more FPS. Game still looks good in my opinion, so this is not anything to complain about. It looks great, you know. We're getting small frame drops, but only about 10 FPS, which is good. But it is not good if you are at 60 FPS. It is a lot more noticeable. But we do get a high 90 FPS every once in a while. We can definitely achieve 100 FPS in a building or something. So for you compound warriors, this is good. On low settings, we're getting 100 while driving around on a mountain bike. There's also an enemy player here, so we can test combat. In this building, we get up to 110 FPS, which is a little better. We even get close to 120 every once in a while. And so far, every time we lower the graphics, we get about 15 more FPS. So we should be able to pass the test on very low. Anyways, even in combat, we're getting about the same FPS. Not bad at all. On very low, we're getting up to 160 in this building. And we get frame drops down to 130 every time we open our menu here. But this is definitely more than 144 FPS, so this passes the test. But what about when we are driving or in combat, you know? I mean, 130 to 140 FPS while driving is more than playable. Cannot complain whatsoever. This is perfect for me. Passes the test while driving. Now driving in combat, we're getting 150 FPS. This card is holding up great on most games so far. We can't get too excited though. So we got the finals on Epic settings, and we can't use ray tracing since this is a GTX card. Sorry about that. But either way, this ain't handling it. We're getting a very rough 60 FPS on Epic settings, which is the max graphic quality. We're gonna try getting into combat here, and as you can see, we get frame drops down to 48 FPS, which can definitely throw off someone's aim, you know? Now on high settings, we're getting the same exact FPS. Talk about optimization, am I right? The finals, you gotta step it up a little, man. I mean, not everyone owns a graphics card that is more than $250. Nah, but we were in combat the whole time, to be fair. And it wasn't even dropping below 50, so I can't complain. Now on medium, we're getting serious with frame drops to 60. This is perfect for a 60 Hz monitor, and it's definitely playable. But it's not 144, which is exactly what I want, so it's failing so far. On low with a little bit of upscaling, we're sitting at 120 FPS. Now this is playable obviously, but this isn't a true 1080p. I mean, this looks horrible, man. I mean, I've seen Nintendo games sharper than this, and we barely get 100 FPS in combat. Not good at all. Thanks to the finals for relying on Unreal Engine and hoping us contestants are using some of the best GPUs in the market. L4D2 on high, and I mean, we're getting 300 FPS. This is pretty self-explanatory. We are double the FPS of what we want to achieve. I'm not even gonna lower the graphics because the game is capped at 300. And I'm too lazy to uncap it. Black Ops 6 on Extreme, we're getting about 50 FPS, which is not really good, especially for this game since it is fast-paced. And you're competing against employed fathers who can afford high refresh rate. I mean, us school kids can't keep up, man. And the frame drops go down to 40, which makes it even worse. but at least the game looks good, and I mean, I can record cinematics in theater mode on extreme, I guess. Now on ultra, we are getting about the same frame rate with the same frame drops. Just every once in a while we get past 60 FPS, which is good, I guess, but it is not consistent enough to play, obviously. On balanced settings, we're getting up to 80 FPS with frame drops down to 68. This is more than playable if you play on 60 Hz, but maybe not for me, because as you can see, I'm getting slammed and we want 144 FPS. So on basic, we're getting close to 100 with frame drops to 78 and an average of about 80. Not what we're looking for, but it isn't bad at all. And man, ignore my gameplay. I am quite rusty. Black Ops 6 has not been my game recently, I will be honest. Now on minimum, we're getting 160 FPS with drops to 140. This is perfect for me. I can't complain whatsoever. But this looks horrible. Not true 1080p. This game also did not pass, but hey, we can get 144 FPS if you were wondering. If you were to raise the resolution a bit, you'd probably be able to get 120 FPS at a visually decent experience. Fortnite on Epic is stuttering like crazy, but at this point, stuttering is a feature in Fortnite. Okay, while gliding, we're getting about 70 FPS. I actually expected this to be worse based off the performance on the spawn island. I was able to get up to 80 FPS while being in tilted towers, which is quite performance demanding. And even in combat, we kept about the same FPS. I did not test Epic much, because I ended up dying off spawn, sadly. We're getting up to 100 FPS in the spawn island on high, but it does drop below it quite consistently. Still better than before though. We're getting about the same FPS while gliding, which is great. We aren't getting mini frame drops, so it is looking good so far. Now on the ground, we're getting everywhere between 70 and 110 FPS, and in combat, we get no frame drops. Literally have the same amount of FPS even while we're in combat. On medium, we're getting more than 120 while gliding, and sometimes it even goes up to 140, which is great considering we're on medium graphics. While on the floor, we get up to 150, but it is not consistent enough for me to confidently say this game passes a test. While in combat, it drops down to about 130. We don't want any frame drops, but this is more than perfect if you cap your FPS at 120, so I can't complain. On low, we are getting 160 FPS while gliding, which is 40 more than last time. Safe to say, this is probably perfect for 144 FPS gaming at 1080p. On the floor, we're getting up to 200 FPS and no lower than 150, even when we're looking for a weapon in a city full of people and being shot at by a random Spider-Man skin. So the 1660 Ti is doing pretty well still. I didn't really test any modern games, but that's because I just can't afford to be buying a lot of these games right now. If you guys want to see anything similar to this, leave a sub below because I plan on continuing this. And if you want to see anything specific, leave a comment and I will most likely do that. Also, I will gladly accept any gifts on Steam if you want to buy a game for me and see me benchmark it. Enough yapping. That is the end of the video. I appreciate y'all for watching, and peace.